If you follow both my channels, this one and the Clips channel, then you're probably familiar with the fact that I've already covered all the Willy's Wonderland villain backstories in a series of shorts, but I wanted to do them more justice by putting them in the linear story and going into more detail on about how they escaped the asylum that they were locked in. In 2021, the film Willy's Wonderland released. A 4-issue prequel comic series quickly followed the movie, covering the backstories of the villains of the movie. Let's go into these comics, but to clarify, I'm only covering the serial killers who become the animatronics, not the whole comic. I highly encourage you to go read these comics on your own if you haven't read them. We open in Hanover, Georgia, where a photographer is taking pictures of a well-dressed nuclear family. Finishing up outside, the family invites the photographer inside, where the daughter goes in the kitchen to get the man a drink. The daughter is met with a gruesome sight upon returning. The photographer choking out her mother, the rest of the family already dead.
Girl drops the glass, running outside, trying to escape the man. But as she's running, she trips, and the man, wielding a knife, stands over her.
We next see the photographer on trial, where we learn his name is Jerry Robert Willis, and he has done this to at least 3 other families. As the prosecutor argues for his conviction, he points at Willis, who lunges forwards and bites off the prosecutor's finger. The judge declares him insane. From the stunt he just pulled, he's sent to a mental institute. Now I'm about to talk about a real serial killer. I'm going to try to be respectful and not go into details about the murders, but if you'd rather not hear about this, skip a minute and 30 seconds. I had a viewer comment on one of my shorts wondering if these fictional killers were based off any real killings and/or killers. Well, upon my first reading of this series, Willy's MO, pretending to be a photographer to gain people's trust before killing them, seemed very familiar to me. I've been a true crime buff practically my whole life, watching Forensic Files, Dateline, and 48 Hours with my grandparents as far back as I can remember, and I knew I'd heard this before. My research brought me to Rodney Alcala, also known as the dating game killer. Why this nickname? Because during his killing spree, he appeared on the show The Dating Game, and even won. But the woman who he won a date with refused to go on the date, unsettled by the man. How did he gain the trust of his victims? That's right, by pretending to be a photographer. After gaining their trust, he murdered them in various ways, but most prominently strangling, much like we see Willy do to the woman in this comic. Rodney was eventually convicted of killing 7 people, but the number must have been much higher. He has been linked to multiple cold cases, but we will never know how many he actually killed, as he passed away on death row in 2021. Now, I don't know if the comic writers were aware of this killer, but with how well known this case is, having been covered by multiple TV shows, like the aforementioned 48 Hours, and talked about by many YouTubers, like Wendigoon in a Serial Killer Iceberg, or Nick Crowley in the second installment of his Darkest Moments TV history series, it seems likely there may have been some inspiration there. But let's get back into the comic. We now find ourselves at a ballet recital, a full audience waiting to see the talented young girls perform. Backstage, Miss Sarah, the girls' ballet teacher, chews her nails as she wonders where Miss Debbie, her best friend, has got off to. The girls ready to start. Sarah wanders the back rooms, opening a door to find Gary, her fiancé, with Debbie, the two intertwined in a kiss. Sarah is overwhelmed with emotion, tears streaming down her face as her gaze falls on a fire axe on the wall. We cut back to the stage. The girls seem confused as they wait for Miss Sarah to come out, the audience sitting in respectful anticipation. Then the curtains start to open as Miss Sarah comes out dancing with Miss Debbie. One of the girls, confused, asks Miss Sarah what she's doing since this isn't part of what they practiced. That's when Miss Debbie's head falls back, and the girls scream, Sarah having murdered her and poked out her eyes. As the curtains open further, Gary's body is revealed, the fire axe still stuck in him, as the audience starts to panic too. I'm about to get real again, so if you don't want to hear that, skip 40 seconds in the video. So is Sarah based off a real-life killer? Well, the closest thing I found to her in my research was Ashley Benefield, who murdered her husband during a custody dispute over their daughter. She had been a ballerina and was therefore known as the real-life Black Swan. But I still do not think that she was based off of her. I just thought it was somewhat similar, so I would mention it. But despite the fact that I couldn't find any killer she was really based on, a majority of murders are committed by the victim's significant other, so it doesn't surprise me that they incorporated this into the comics. And the fact that Sarah didn't plan the murder, and it was just a spur of a moment, emotional thing, before she went on to dance on the stage with a corpse, very easily explains why she was sent to the mental institute. Speaking of which, we now find ourselves near Hayesville, Nevada, at the mental institution Jerry Robert Willis has been sent to. While in the institution, he's brought to a psychologist, but Willis refuses to speak, just slamming his head into the table the doctor had laid her files on. 2 guards react, restraining Willis, and bringing him to another room. A woman is already in the room, and as the two talk, the woman introduces herself as
Sarah,
and tells him that she is a monster. Willis argues that everyone is a monster inside and befriends the woman, revealing he picked up a paperclip with his mouth when he slammed his head earlier. He's planning an escape.
Time passes, and we see the patients gathered for a group therapy session. The psychologist from before asking if anyone wants to share, specifically asking Gus if he would like to share his story. Gus asked Willy for permission before telling his story. He used to work at the zoo. One day he stuck a banana to one of the gorillas, which led to him being yelled at by a zookeeper. Apparently this has happened before, and Gus has been warned not to do it anymore. The zookeeper slaps him, calling him a big stupid ape. We see the gorillas behind Gus start getting agitated as Gus tells her she shouldn't have done that, before he proceeds to hit her back, but he doesn't stop. At least not until she's dead. Gus didn't make me think of any real murderers, but he did make me think of another fictional murderer, that being Lenny from Of Mice and Men, who accidentally breaks a woman's neck after stroking her hair, and she tries to leave. Both men seem to have some kind of mental deficiency, and accidentally kill people when overwhelmed. Back in the comic, we find ourselves at a crime scene, a corpse on the ground, and a bloody smiley face drawn on the wall. The cops discuss the bloody Banksy, aka Arthur Allen, an art teacher who had a mental breakdown and started murdering people, committing acts of cannibalism, and drawing with the victim's blood at the crime scene. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most infamous killers of all time, murdering people before sending codes to decipher into newspapers. While only 5 murders committed by him have been 100% confirmed, the killer claimed 37 in the very last letter he sent. The only suspect ever named in this case? Arthur Lee Allen, who was a former teacher. Now this one is the only one I can say with confidence I believe was inspired directly by that. There's no way they made Artie's name Arthur Allen and made him a former teacher without knowing about this. Now, as for that smiley face he left at the crime scene. In the real world, there's a true crime conspiracy theory known as the smiley face killers, in which people have connected a series of drownings of college-age men to smiley face graffiti that was drawn in the area. I wonder if this theory may have inspired the drawing of the smiley face, at least to some extent. But we see Arthur draw many artworks later that have nothing to do with smiley faces, so maybe it's just a coincidence. Willy's group is playing a card game at a table when a woman walks behind them, glancing over at their group periodically. Willy invites her to join them, and she mentions that they wouldn't like it. Upon Willy asking who they is, this girl switches through multiple personalities. Willy puts an arm around her, calling her a personality chameleon, or Cammy for short. He invites her to the group, and then tells Gus it's time. Gus pretends like he's hurt. When an orderly runs over to help him, he breaks the orderly's back before he gets tased and dragged away by guards, but not before winking and showing Willy that he managed to grab a key. This is where Cammy mentions her brother Jed, who will play a bigger role later. Cammy's a difficult one, because we never learn why she ended up in the mental institute, so I'm not even going to try to guess with her. Willy sits at a desk, finishing up a drawing he shows to Cammy, who praises it before showing it to their new friend Tito, who, as he turns around, we see is holding a turtle he found in the mental institute's yard. We learn through the conversation between Willy and Tito that Tito worked in some kind of fields, and even then he was good at finding turtles. One day, his co-worker disrespected one of his turtles, and Tito killed them all while they were asleep in their bunks, which is why he was sent to this mental institution. Also, the drawing that Willy was working on is of an orange weasel, and when Cammy saw it, she told Willy they should send it off to her brother Jed, because he can build anything. Now Tito was an odd one because I could not find anything similar to his story. I'd found reports of people coming back and killing their co-workers, nothing to do with any animals. But what this did remind me of was both Doom and John Wick. In Doom, Doom Guy's bunny, Daisy, is killed. And this is a major motivating factor in why Doom Guy goes on to kill so many demons. Now, I'm pretty sure most people, especially if you're on the internet, are familiar with what happens with John Wick. But just in case you don't know, in the John Wick movie franchise, in the very first movie, John Wick's dog is killed. Now, John Wick, being a retired assassin, essentially starts taking down the whole criminal underworld. Now, the major difference between these two I just mentioned and Tito is the people that disrespected Tito's pet, Tito murdered in their sleep. Now, another thing is, we never actually learn whether Tito's turtle was killed by these co-workers or not. We just know that he puts it as them being disrespected. Let's get back to the comic and see if the next killer has any overt references to real killers. We now find ourselves in the Institute's library. A man sits in the library, quietly reading a book, when he starts being harassed by 2 other inmates. The 2 start pushing him around, telling him they saw him in the documentary last night. He's known as the Midnight Strangler, and killed at least 20 people. And he also can't speak, since he was choked by his mother when he was a child. One of the men starts to unbuckle his pants, obviously trying to take advantage of the strangler. But things don't work out in the men's favor. The strangler gets up, elbowing one of the men in the face, before pulling a knife, killing one of them with a knife, and strangling the other one to death. He's then pulled off by 3 workers, who throw him in a padded room in isolation. But, while in there, he's visited by Willy, telling him he looks like he could use some new friends. When Willy's talking, we also learn that this man's name is Ozzy. While the 2 men who attacked Ozzy are talking about the documentary they saw about him, they mention that he killed 20 co-eds. This immediately made me think of the co-ed killer Edmund Kemper. Kemper was abused by his mother growing up and was even almost killed by a family member like Ozzy, although in his case it was his sister who tried to push him in front of a train and pushed him into the deep end of a pool. Kemper's first victims were his grandparents, which he immediately admitted to and was sent to prison for, and upon his release he started murdering co-eds. He strangled, stabbed, and shot, 2 of which we see Ozzy do. All the killers we've already met are gathered together at a table, but Willy says he needs one more to round out his crazy 8, as we go into a flashback, finding ourselves at a Renaissance fair. The place is bustling as we see a man standing guard at a tent. He's decked out in full knight armor, a sword in front of him, his hands resting atop it. 2 men who are not dressed for the occasion approach the man, making fun of him, before eventually one of them grabs his nose. The knight brandishes his sword, removing the offender's hand, before running both through and returning to his post. This may be disappointing to you, but I was unable to find anything similar to this story. Willy announces his group complete, before opening a closet to reveal that they have already taken out one staff member, presumably to use his keycard to access the rest of the facility. We switch points of view following a guard as he walks down the hallway checking that everyone's in their room. Willy's left a dummy in the bed, which is enough to convince the guard, until the guard realizes that the door isn't latched. He immediately starts yelling into the walkie-talkie that they have a problem, but as he runs into the security room, all he finds is 3 patients standing over a dead staff member, Willy, Cammy, and Art. As the guard charges them, Art gets the upper hand, shoving a taser into his mouth. We then see more staff members freaking out. As 2 of them start running down a hallway, they run into a 3rd one with their back to them. The one with his back turned is saying he's just locking down this area and that the escapees were heading for the main gate. But after the 2 staff members leave, it's revealed that Tito was wearing a staff member uniform and tricked the guards. The others come out of the woodwork, but Willy's busy. We see the female psychiatrist from earlier in her office as a shadow appears behind her. We then see Willy's gang taking out more guards, but they're still trapped in this lockdown part of the institute. But Willy uses the psychiatrist to trick one of the guards into opening the door before Willy takes him out, still taking the psychiatrist with him. We then see 2 staff members who are taking a smoke break outside when a van rams through the garage door behind them. Willy and his crew inside, and the psychiatrist. They make it onto the main road, the police right on their tail. As they tell Willy and his crew to let the psychiatrist go, they do, but not in the way the police wanted, throwing her through the cop car's windshield. That's when they find themselves at a police blockade, but they just ram through it before one of their tires is shot out, and they go through a guardrail and down a hill, only stopping when the van hits a tree. They walk into the woods, not stopping for hours, until they come across an abandoned building. Gus breaks them in as Willy says it's perfect. Earlier, when Willy was drawing, the book sitting on his desk was a satanic book, and he has this, the drawing of Willy, and drawings of other characters that he spreads across the table. And this is where the comics come to an end. Now, in the movie, we learn that this group went on to turn that abandoned place into Willy's Wonderland, a family entertainment place where the Crazy 8 secretly murdered children. When they were almost caught by the police, they used a satanic ritual to switch their souls into the animatronics that Jed, Cammy's brother that was mentioned earlier, had built for them. If you want to know what happens after this, I highly encourage you to go watch the movie. Thank you very much for watching this video, and as I wrap this up, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing if you enjoy this content, but more than that, please have a great day.